Happy New Year, everybody. How's everybody doing? Listen, if you've been around Port City any length of time, you know that right after Christmas and up until last week, that week between Christmas and New Year's is my absolute favorite time of the year. I like it because of the personal treat. I like it because of a lot of things. This year, we actually put all of our decorations up already, which is like a miracle. We usually leave it up until February or March or something like that. And but we got a new system. My wife has a new system. Now we actually organize it all in boxes. The first time we've done that in 30 plus years of marriage. But this year I noticed that the box would have what's labeled on it. So we put like what's in there and then she would label it. And then also a list of all the things she wants to buy next year right alongside of it. So when I get them out next year, I'll already have my list of all the stuff I have to buy. So this is a great time of year. I love the new year. Obviously a lot of you guys do too. Like we're gonna go back to church for the new year. So thank you for being here. But this is also the year, or this time of year, January, we all, our cynicism sort of dissipates for just a little bit, right? People are at the grocery store, they're buying fruits and vegetables, like they're gonna start new diets, and you got running shoes, and the gyms are all full. So we collectively prepare ourselves to be different this year. And there's this fundamental belief in this time of year that change is possible. And so I wanna remind you or tell you or encourage you this morning that it is actually possible for you and I to be different, but it requires something from us. It requires something of us. A lot of us have this idea, and some of you, right, you know what this is like. You've just felt this sort of pressure or this tension that you need to be better than you are, or more is demanded from you or whatever, and we have all these ways in which we sort of are compelled or pushed into the kind of change that we think we want. But what I want to be able to begin this year with is talk about a vision for formation. Like, what kind of change do you really want? What kind of change are you made for? And let's try to get a vision for that. I want to take you on kind of a journey in my own world of this process and how this works. And it began about 20 years ago in 2004, and I know this because I found this in my journal. But this began to take on a new vision in my life of how or what kind of change I was actually looking for, a new kind of vision for the kind of formation that I hoped for or longed for. And I've always been fired up about New Year's Day because it always feels like you get a clean slate, right? It's like the clock rolls from 11:59 to midnight. And it's like, man, the new year is here. I've like done perfect. I've committed no sins. I've done nothing, right? For like at least the first 30 or 40 seconds, you get this clean slate where everything is like it ought to be. It unravels pretty quickly, I get it, but I love that idea. And so one year in 2004, now you gotta keep in mind, this is before Google. And this is when there used to be these things on TV, these news shows in the morning, like I think the Today Show was one of them a long time ago. And you know what I'm talking about? And there were these segmented stories. And this particular January, I noticed that all these stories were about ways in which my life could be better. And so because I'm a note taker, I just decided to start writing down what I was told to do. That's why I was just gonna make me a list of all the things that were told or taught or modeled for me to make my life better. And these topics ranged from health maintenance to home maintenance to car maintenance. It was all over the map. And I began to notice that I was informed about my diet. You're supposed to eat like 4 veggies or 3 fruits or 2 types of protein, particularly specifically, or preferably fish or chicken. I think a partridge in a pear tree was in there somewhere. And then there was all the different vitamins. You got to have calcium, and you got to have fiber, and you got to have vitamin B and vitamin D and vitamin C and all these things, and just kind of making this list. There was cardio. You had to get at least 30 minutes of cardio in every day. Then you had strength training. But you also had to take time to recover from exercises that you had participated in. So you got to add sort of calendar time for recovery. There were suggestions about managing stress and nurturing creativity and maximizing your potential, which seemed to stress me out. I wasn't sure how that worked together. And then you have your finances, and they talked about your finances like you have a CPA and a financial planner and your attorney, like you meet with them all the time. Like, I don't do this, so what is this about? It was about checking your credit report, filing your tax return, shredding important documents, except the ones you're supposed to keep. There was a whole list of all those things as well. You're supposed to, you were told to change our oil, change our air filters in our house, change your batteries in your smoke detectors, I wrote all this down, replace your toothbrush every 3 months and your pillows every 3 years. You're to check your skin for moles and your yard for moles, right? All this is happening. You fertilize, you amortize, you winterize, you scrutinize, and then you realize that you don't have time to live your life, right? That's what happens. I remember waking up to this and thinking, I don't even have time. I cannot, if I were really organized, there's not enough time in my day to do all the things that I've been told to do. And this is only ramped up with the increase of the avalanche of information that you get every single minute of every single day, talking about how you can be different and you should be different. There's, cold plunges and just so many things that you should be doing for your health and to be a better person. And so we start off with a sense of optimism. Right? This is gonna be our year. And you know what happens, right? Just a very short time into it, we get disappointed, things happen, we quit, and we just sort of resolve, I guess I'm just not cut out to be that kind of person. And you just go back to the way that you were. And so I've heard things like I know people tell this all the time, I'm not focused, I'm not disciplined. And we say this as though this is something you either have or you don't have, that it's not something you have to learn and develop. I think that's what we've been duped in. I lived most of my life thinking, I can't focus. And it's because no one had ever taught me how to learn how to focus. Like, what are the things you need to participate in and do and arrange your life in order for these things to happen? And if you do these little small things over a long period of time, you look back and you say, oh, I think I'm actually kind of disciplined. At what point does that begin to happen? We'll talk about that more next week. But not only are you not cut out to be that kind of person, God has actually intended you to be that kind of person, to be this kind of person. We just need a vision for what it looks like. So how do we find this out? So here's the question I want to begin with, because all of us have started this year and you've got your list of things, but what kind of person are you likely to become in 2025? Like if you just do the things you have been doing, let's play a little game of predict the future. It's actually not that hard. All the patterns that you sort of know that you're trying to change, right? What kind of person are you likely to become if those things continue? For some of you, right, you're used to playing games in relationships or with your money or with people around you, or you're sort of squirrely with the truth, or you'll always take advantage of an opportunity at the expense of someone else. Like what kind of person are you likely to become if those patterns continue? I talk to people all the time, especially I remember a few years ago, this kid comes up to me, he's in high school, and he's like, man, he said, it's the end of school year, I've been hanging out with the wrong crowd, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, you do know what to do. He's like, what do you mean? I said, let's play predict the future. If you keep doing what you're doing, what do you think is likely to happen to you by the end of summer? He said, well, that's easy. I said, of course it's easy. All right, what is likely to happen? And so this is the time and the chance where we're all fired up. We want to do something different. I just want for us to have a picture of the kind of thing that we want to do that's different enough to actually change us, that's actually powerful enough to make a difference, the kind of difference you want it to make in your life. That's what my aim is today. And we're also going to give you a tool to sort of help that, and you'll hear more about that at the end of our time today. So one of the assumptions that I hold, and I believe this, I rarely feel pressure to convince anybody about what I believe. People come in, they'll ask me questions, and we'll have conversations in all kinds of different places, on airplanes, or whenever, grocery store lines. It's pretty amazing where people will ask you stuff. And but I never feel pressure to try and convince someone. And the reason is because this fundamental belief that I believe that every human being is made by God and they are made for God. And so I am never working against what someone already wants in the deepest part of who they are. And you have to test yourself on that. You have to decide, is that what you believe? Is that what you really hold to be the case? It brings a lot of freedom when you see people that way. If that's true, then it stands to reason that everything finds its meaning and its purpose within its context of its relationship to God. This is a really important thing for you to consider. If I were you, I would write this down and I would wrestle with it. Because the inverse would also be true, right? If we're made by God and for God, then everything finds its meaning and its purpose within its context to that relationship. The inverse is also true, that nothing will find meaning and purpose apart from our relationship to God. And I mean everything. I mean your work. I mean your relationship at home. I mean your schoolwork. I mean everything. That the goal of what we're trying to understand that God wants from us is not how you become a better person, but how your life actually fits together so that you live the life that you've been created to live. We've been created, right, to bear God's image. To bear his image. That's what Genesis is about. We were made in the image of God. We were made to rule and to reign with him. We serve as his representatives, overseeing what it is that he has made. And our purposes are to bring about his intentions in the world. Every single day, every place that we are. You were made in his image, and you were made to bring that to bear on the world around you. We've got to have a vision for formation. What kind of person is that? That's the second question, right? So you have this first question, what kind of person are you likely to be? And the second question is, what kind of person are you created to become? And you need a vision for that, right? It has very little to do with like being in better shape, or it has little to do with your weight, or it has to do with who you are. What kind of person are you created to become? So I want to take you back, because this was a pivotal thing for me 20 plus years ago. But it was a vision beyond having a better life or being a better person. Those are not very helpful at all. Because what happens, and we've ended up, especially in the church world, is that our vision for the formation that God wants to do is for us to sort of have a moral compliance to some system of issues that God seems to favor over others. And if we can just comply with those, then we'll be the person we were supposed to be all along. I remember thinking this when I was like 15 or 16 years old. And it was like, you have this list: don't drink, don't smoke, don't cuss. I'm like, okay, I do that, or I don't do that. I must be perfect. And then you realize that something's still missing. And so you add more behaviors to it. And then when you do that, you realize something else is still missing. You realize that you've missed the whole point. So this is why you feel like God is so disappointed in you, because you keep creating these lists of things you think God expects of you. And then you don't do it, so you feel like a failure. And you've never really stopped and said, what kind of person has God created me to be? What I'm talking about is the kind of person who out of their life comes this way of life. You know, Dallas Willard talks this way. He talks about that our most natural responses are in line with who God has created us to be, that it just comes out of us effortlessly. For these things to happen, we're gonna talk more about this, because it actually happens in your life, just usually in the wrong directions. We're gonna talk more about this in the next couple of weeks. This is one of those messages where I had a chapter and a half from Romans 6 and a chapter and a half from 2 Corinthians 7 and 8, and then chapters 2 and 3. And when I was writing the message, it was like 3.5 hours long, and I thought none of y'all would appreciate that, so I cut a chunk of it. Is that cool with y'all? So a lot's gonna be coming. But when I talk about this is exactly what I mean by integrity. When we talk about integrity in our culture, what you usually mean is that someone does what they say they're gonna do, and that is important. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something so much more. Integrity is a kind of wholeness. It's not about figuring out all the different compartments in your life and how God might fit into each one of them. It's beginning to understand how your whole life fits into the life that he intends for you to have. I meet so many people who can't make sense of their work or their struggles or their challenges because there's no integration. This is what we are called. This is what I'm talking about, to become this kind of person. When I was younger, I remember, I used to have a really short temper. And I say used to, it still rears its head every once in a while. It's gotten much better. But I remember years ago just really, really struggling with my temper and wanting to yell at my kids. I know y'all have never thought that, right? Something about our kids just makes you like, where did this come from? And I remember just being stressed about money and stressed about all these things. This is early in ministry, and how we're gonna do all this stuff and how this is gonna happen. I got a small, kids and blah, blah, blah. And I remember being in my car one day, and I don't know, somebody did something dumb in front of me, or I was in the wrong turning lane, or I can't remember exactly what was going on, but I just remember just yelling into air. Y'all never done that before? Just me? I just lost my mind. I'm just like yelling, and there's nobody in the car, nobody outside can hear me. I'm just, ah! And I wanted to punch the dashboard. I remember thinking, like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Do you have anything like that in your life that just, you can't figure out, it just happens? Maybe a thought pattern, it may be a way you see, but it's just something you go, what is wrong with me? And so what I decided to do is I said, I'm gonna try not to lose my temper anymore. And so you learn all kinds of tactics, like count to 10. So something happens, and you count to 10. 1, 2, 3. You don't lose your temper, but you're still angry. You just get stuffed somewhere else. And then you're just like a ball of light. You just wait for something to explode, right? I thought that didn't work. And so I begin to think like, okay, this transformation is not just about stopping this and stopping that, but what if I became the kind of person for whom these kinds of outbursts were unthinkable? Like, what if I became the kind of person, like some of you may be struggling in your thought life, so everything is like, oh man, and you thought, what if I became the kind of person who sees people with dignity and worth and value so that to objectify them is unthinkable? Like, what if you became that kind of person? That set me off on a whole new adventure and journey of how this would unfold in my life. And there were two things that I learned in this season of my life 20 years ago. Number one is that the normal, natural pace of my life was not likely to lead me in directions that were gonna be helpful to that happening. Most of my life was arranged with all the pressure that people demand from me to do and to perform. Very little pressure was put on the kind of person that I would become. And the people who actually needed that the most were the least likely to demand it from me because they were the most likely to be understanding. The people in my home would understand if dad's stressed out or dad's on the edge. They would understand that. They're not gonna demand that from me. They're gonna be sympathetic to the fact that it's not happening. Everybody else will just take and take and take. I said, I got the normal natural pace is not gonna do this. And I needed a way, number two is I needed a way to see this and to pay attention and to particularly pay attention over time. Because I'll tell you, some of you have got great ambitions. You're gonna change your life in January. You are not gonna change your life in January. Ain't gonna happen. I meet people all the time. Mike came in, changed my life. I'm like, that's yet to be written, right? We don't know that. You feel it, you're excited, you're fired up, but nothing's really different until things are different. And this is where we've got to get to. And I needed a way to see, because most of our responses to change, or most of our drive to change, is based on regret. We don't like what we've done, so we're gonna do something different. Regret is, don't get me wrong, is a great motivator, but it's insufficient. Regret is accessible and it's easy because you go, oh, I'm angry. I got a bad temper. I'm gonna stop, I don't wanna have a bad temper. That's easy to find. What's hard to find is, why am I angry? Why does this keep happening? And what kind of person would I have to become so that this doesn't happen more? That takes a lot more effort, a lot more time, a lot more reflection, a lot more willingness to get honest with yourself. But this is the only way that you're gonna find a vision for formation compelling enough for the sacrifice that's required. It's the only way. I remember this, pretty vividly see this, and I wanna show you this. We've talked about this over the last few months ago. But this is I just wanna give you a couple of snippets of passages. This is from 2 Corinthians chapter 3. I want you to see this, because remember, we're made in God's image. We've been created in God's image. We're created to bear his image and to bring that to the world around us. That's the vision of formation we wanna have. And so 2 Corinthians chapter 3, it says this, and we all, who with unveiled faces, and this idea of unveiled faces is those who have been sort of awakened, or we see out of this new covenant, this new way, we all with unveiled faces, we contemplate the Lord's glory. We are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. And so a couple things I want you to notice there. First of all, what is happening to those people with unveiled faces? What's happening? We are what? We're being transformed. We're being transformed into what? You can say it out loud. Into his image. So what does that look like? And you'll say, well, Mike, you know. I'm saying, no, I don't know. Do you have words to describe it? Do you have a picture in your head? We're being transformed into this image with ever increasing glory. And it tells us exactly what we're supposed to do in the line above it. We all with unveiled faces do what? Contemplate. And what are you contemplating? The Lord's glory. And what we all want is, can you tell me what that is so I can do it? The whole idea of contemplate means that you sit down and you think about it and you chew on it. I mean, when people ask me, say, Mike, what do you want when you are communicating or teaching or doing what I'm doing here? What do you want for people? There's two things. I want people to hear something in such a way that they're willing to stay in the game, to keep going. And number two is I want you to think. I want you to think. I hear people all the time say, Mike, I heard this and I learned this. I'm like, you didn't learn it, you heard it. You heard it. You listened to a talk, you read a book, you heard a podcast. You didn't learn it, you heard it. Learning is something else. Learning is where you take what you've heard and it seeps into you to contemplate the Lord's glory. It's interesting that it says here that we with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into the image with ever increasing glory. We are being transformed into the thing that we behold with our souls. And you have to contemplate this. You have to spend time. It's the idea of chewing on it and wrestling and defining this and reflecting on it. I write things down. I keep a journal, I do. And as I don't write because I'm a writer. I write because I don't remember things. I write because I need to understand things. I write because I need to see things. I hear enough all the time of saying, well, you know. It's like, no, I don't know. Tell me. Articulate it. God has given us the gift of words and language. And we think that language, this is next 2 weeks' message, so I gotta stop. But we think that language is like because we're pragmatic, we think that language is given primarily to communicate clearly. And it's not. Language is fundamentally expressive. It's logos. It's to bring something into existence. And we need to contemplate the Lord's glory so that we are transformed into that vision. You've seen this a million times. This is, I've been obsessed with process really since my days in architecture. And I've always tried to figure out how do people become the way they are. And if you've been at Port City, you've seen this 1,000 times. You'll see it 1,000 more times if you don't leave. Encounter, information, expression. Encounter, this is how, what we're talking about is this middle circle. What happens in you? What is happening in you? How are you being transformed and into what? So that the expression of our lives comes effortlessly from the kind of person that we are, and this all centers on what it is that we see. I remember kind of stumbling on this again 20 years ago, and I know again because I've got the dates. But I remember this sort of way of thinking about change and listing out things and trying to have more willpower or more discipline or just to be better. I remember that began to dissipate. And this was the genesis of my one word. It was where my one word came from. It was before we had picking a word. It was this place where I began to discover this and see this. It was the beginning of a kind of vision for formation that had more to do with freedom and calling and identity than anything productive. I didn't know this at the time, but that's what was beginning to happen. I remember precisely where it came from. I was reading my Bible, and I'd kept a journal, and I would write down a bunch of sentences in my journal. I would write down, this is what happened this day, and this is what I was feeling, and this is what I'm struggling with, and I'd write a verse down, and here's what this verse means to me, and here's what I think God. So I would do this all the time, and one day I just got tired of it. I just felt like too much. And I was reading in the book of John, in John chapter 7, Jesus shows up at the feast, and it says with a loud voice, Jesus says, and this is it, verse 38, whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. And I just stopped. And I began to look at this, and I just began to write, and I just thought, out of his heart, out of this place in the middle, what's gonna happen? It'll just be this effortless flow of these rivers of living water. And I just began to contemplate, what might that mean? What if my life could just flow? Because it felt like most of the time I was trying to grab or demand or manipulate or force or make. You ever feel like that? Or please? What if my life could just kind of come out of me quite naturally? And it offered something nourishing and refreshing to the world around us. What if it could flow? So, because I went to architecture school, this is what I put in my journal. It took me about 10 minutes to do this. I just wrote the word flow. And I just began to look at it. I thought, what would it mean for me? And then for the next month, I didn't really write a lot in my journal. I would just open up my journal to this page and just look at it. What I began to notice is that this was more of a lens and not a promise. I wasn't promising. It wasn't like, Lord, I'm promised I'm gonna let my life flow from you, or let your life flow from me. It was just a way to see. It was a lens through which I could begin to see and notice things that I was looking for or longing for or wanting. And so that began this process where I began to think, there's something powerful about picking words. In 2007, we challenged our church and we said, hey, we're not gonna pick New Year's resolutions anymore. We're not gonna make a bunch of promises to be better people. We're gonna pick one word to focus on for an entire year and use it as a lens through which we can see God's work in our lives. We created a process for it, we wrote a book about it, and then 18 years later, I'll be picking my 18th word this year. I showed you just a couple weeks ago, but this is my list. It starts in 2007, goes all the way through to 24. There's 18 words there, 17 words, 18 words there, 17 words there. And you'll look at this and you'll say, I could never do that. And you're right, you can't do it today. You can't get 18 years of work in one day. But I want to show you, it started with this one word. It started when I wrote flow on the top of my journal, and I just began to look at it and look through it. And that began the process by which we learned to say, Lord, can you give me a vision for the kind of person that I hope to become? What's interesting about this is available. Out of his heart will flow rivers of living water, right? Who is this available to? The one who does what? The one who believes. Whoever believes in me, this is the kind of life you're gonna experience. This is not intellectual. I believe he was crucified, I believe he rose again, therefore my life. It's not that. It's walking and abiding and remaining and trusting and taking cues from him and learning his ways. And then saying, Lord, how can my life better reflect your ways? How can I respond to this situation in a way that would reflect your heart? I'm supposed to bear your image. How can I do that in this circumstance, in this place, in this way, in this business? To integrate so that all the parts of our lives begin to be integrated into this life that God intends for us to live. That you become the kind of person for whom that is not just possible, but probable. Do you realize this is precisely what God has promised? He says God has promised to finish that which he has begun. He has promised to complete the work that he's begun in you. So that whole idea became this movement of my one word. Again, I mentioned we wrote a book about it. It was on the radio station, K-Love, and people were doing this all over the place. It was actually kind of cool. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people have picked words over the last decade and a half. And some of you in here, at the beginning of this year, you picked a word. And I want to tell you that even if you didn't keep your word very well, the process of picking a word is really formative because you're considering and you're giving language and you're saying, Lord, can you help me see? And then you're describing that using your own words. What kind of person could I become? Does God intend for me to be? And so every year, thousands and thousands of people pick words. And every year, thousands and thousands of people forget their words, right? How many of you have done that, right? You picked a word this year and you can't remember what it is. Perfect, I get it. No judgment. And I've been scratching my head for the last 15 years trying to think about how do we do this better? How do we provide tools and ways that this is a simple, accessible discipline that anybody can do. Anybody can do this. And that's what I want. But what we need is we need a way to remember, to keep this in front of us, and we need a way to reflect. And so for the last 10 years, I've been trying to devise a tool to help people remember their words and to pay attention to their own personal formation, to be able to see and to begin to understand God's work in their life, to begin. Right? This doesn't work like, it's not instant. It's a process. You see something and you reflect on it, you describe it, and then you look back and you see it. And most of what we know is always seen in the rearview mirror. Say, oh, that's what that was. And God continues to invite us to walk by faith, to trust him. Whoever believes in him, out of their innermost being will flow rivers of living water. And so in my kind of hunch to try to figure out how do we do this, I've always suspected there'd be a digital solution to this. And some of you know where I'm going. So last year and a half, 2 years, we've worked on this project and we've created an app called the Mirror app. And because you're a part of our church, we're just gonna make it available to you because we really need your help in figuring this whole thing. We're gonna figure this out together. Does that sound like a plan? A couple thousand people trying to build something together. That sounds like a lot of fun. But we're building this into a tool that I think is gonna be a really powerful tool for reflection, hence the name. It is interesting that the word contemplate in 2 Corinthians 3, we with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory. The word contemplate is literally to be seen as in a mirror. And so I was thinking about this. People look at their phones more than almost anything else. I know it's sad, but it's true. This is the frame for most people's worldview. This is how they see the world. And we know that it is forming us. We know from a lot of the latest research. We know from the mental health studies. We know from all these things that this is forming us and shaping us into things that we're not excited about, that are not helpful to our well-being and our wholeness and becoming the kind of people we long to become. So I began to consider, what if instead of the phone being a source of distraction, it could be a source of focus? So we created this app. The app will help you pick your word. It will help you remember your word because, hey, it just gives you a reminder all the time. Hey, your word's this. It's almost impossible to forget it. It invites you to reflect on it, and it will actually, you'll eventually be able to do voice to text. You can just talk into it, tell it what you're thinking. And part of, this whole sort of idea and kind of effort has been, how do you help people reflect in ways that allows them to see? And if you know me, you know that I believe that the single most helpful tool for self-reflection is a what? A journal. I have been badgering you for 25 years to keep a journal. But what I've found is that most people just don't do it. No harm, no foul, no judgment. We just took a much different approach. We just said we're gonna help you to use your phone. You can text, you can talk, you can Instagram stuff. I mean, some of you need a journal more than you need your Instagram because some of your Instagram posts should be in your journal and not on Instagram, right? Because everybody knows, they're like, dude, this is way too much. They still like it because they feel bad that they don't, but they're like, this is too much. So what we're gonna do is the app will help you to record your thoughts and your insights and your reactions, and then it will build a journal for you. Does that sound good? And then it will eventually give this thing back to you in the form of a mirror so you can see what it is that you're thinking and feeling and where you're thinking it and feeling it, so you can see the kind of person that everybody else already knows you're becoming. Just kidding. So here's what I want you to do. I need you to help me with this. Download the app. I think there's a website, portcity.church/mirror. Listen, some of you are not digital people, I get it. I'm not either, but this has been insanely helpful, but we're gonna build something that's gonna be very helpful. So we need you guys to use it, to give us your input. It's got places in there for you to check in. All kinds of things are gonna be coming in the next 30, 60, 90 days. But here's the way it's gonna start. When you open the app up, you'll log in, give it your email, it'll send you a code, and you'll log in. The very first question to ask you is, what kind of person are you created to become? And you're not gonna be able to answer that question in the drive-through line at Chick-fil-A. It's gonna take some thought. If you did your personal retreat, this is all a part of that exercise. But I sat down with that question and I used this statement, that you have been created in the image of God to bear the image of God. What kind of person would that be? And you can just start and you can say, pull some of the stuff we talked about today. I want to be the kind of person for whom my life flows. I want to be the kind of person who lives with a sense of wholeness, or I want to live with a sense of where all the components of my life sort of integrate into this unified life. Or it can be about, maybe I want to be someone who's more tender, because a tender person is less likely to lose their minds on someone for cutting them off in traffic, right? You want to have some way to sort of give some description to the kind of person you want to become, a vision of your formation. So you'll do that, and I wrote mine in a journal, then I copied it into the app, and then the app actually suggests some words for you. In case you're like writer's block, can't think of any, you can put your own in there. It'll suggest some. And I want you to use the app to pick your word. And then once you do that, it'll be prompting you for reflections and all that such, and we'll be working together over the next few weeks to kind of help understand what's intuitive, what's not, what's helpful, what's not, and we're gonna do that together. But here's the first exercise. I want you to consider that you've been created in the image of God, made by Him and for Him. Every one of you, regardless of what you've done, where you've been made by God and for God to bear His image. And then we are transformed with ever-increasing glory as we contemplate and look and seek and worship and come to understand who He is and encounter Him. Our hearts are transformed into the likeness for which we've been created. And I want you to spend some time and answer the question, what kind of person am I created to become? Take that, pop in the app, and then pick your word. Can we do that? Perfect. Do you know how you become the kind of person you're intended to become? I'm gonna tell you next week. Let's pray together. Father, thank you so much that you envision us in a particular way. What a freeing thought that you see me, you see each of us with a view of the redemption that you intend for us. That accommodates for pain and hardship and regret. So Father, I ask that you would give us grace as we consider the kind of people that we're created to become. That sin patterns and wickedness would not have a foothold in keeping us from trusting or believing that that could be true for us. I pray, Father, that we begin to get a sense of vision, of calling into this kind of person. And that, Father, we would begin to see that in some way and to find hope in it. Father, I believe I know that's what you want to do in us, to bear your image and then bring that into the world in which we live, in the places we show up. So would you be faithful to continue the process that you have begun? And I ask all of this in the name of your Son, Jesus, who is our King. Amen.